Welcome to the Choose to Be podcast. You're here with Alana Gordon, and it's just me today. No Amy. She will be back next week. And actually, next week, we are starting the beginning of a four-part series of looking at separation, when to do it, if to do it, how to come back from it. That's coming next week. Today, what I want to talk about is this idea of how to find yourself again after trauma. When we go through something traumatic, a natural effect of that's really common is that we have a disconnect from this feeling and this sense of who we are. And a lot of times this happens because we had this idea of how the world worked or a relationship worked. And then when we go through something traumatic and that rips that rug right out from under you, that can be so disorienting in every area of your life. Now, especially when we're talking about betrayal trauma, because when you have had your significant other and they have been this primary attachment, and especially where if you have felt safe or believed relationally that these things weren't happening, and then all of a sudden you find out about secretive behaviors that have been happening for a significant amount of time, sometimes the entire relationship, that can really take the sense of knowing and understanding and just crumble it. And so when we all of a sudden go, okay, I thought I could trust you and I can't. Now all of a sudden, what can I trust? Can I trust myself? I thought I could trust you and I can't. I thought I could trust God and now can I? I thought I could trust my friends. Can I trust my friends? And it makes everything very disoriented. And so as part of this healing process, one part of the journey is really learning how to find yourself again after trauma. And this can be a deeply personal journey that we go on, and it looks different for everybody. So this is not one of those where we go, okay, you have this step and then you do this step and then you do this step. Really, none of healing is linear, but there are certain tools or concepts that we can start looking at. So one of those things we can do, and if you've been listening to the podcast for very long, you're going to go, Alana, you're saying this again. But really, it's acknowledging your experience and having awareness. And this awareness really is the foundation of any type of change or any type of healing is we have to have awareness of what is actually happening. And as we learn how to recognize and have acceptance that what we have been through is traumatic and recognize how it has impacted us, then we can start really beginning to be able to put ourselves together again and to heal that. Now, I want to highlight that the word I'm using here is journey. This is not something that we just go flip on a light switch and it's, oh, there I am. I found myself. Wouldn't that be great? But no, this is a journey. And I'll use the analogy sometimes that when you go through something traumatic, it can feel like somebody has come and hit you with a sledgehammer and you've broken into a million pieces. And part of this journey is putting those pieces back together again. And not only putting those pieces back together again, but then adding in these new experiences where we become even more whole and even more complete. That's post traumatic growth. Now, another thing that we can do to help on this process of finding ourselves again is to seek support. I can't tell you how many women come to me and tell me that they don't have anybody, that they've been doing this all alone. And if you're sitting here listening to this and you're like, Lana, I have you, and Amy, I have you, and that's about it, you're not alone. There's so many people out there going through this on their own, and it is the hard way. So seek support and find people who A, can hold your experience and be safe people. And I say people as emotionally, they can let you have the experience you're having without trying to change you or trying to change your experience, and that they can have love and empathy for you and what you're going through. That's why I really love groups, and I'll just plug our groups really quick, is I really love group support, it can be really scary to start. But when you get in that group and you find other people who are going through it and getting it, that support really can help carry you and hold you as you're going through this healing process. So seek support and seek support from people who are trained in this and who understand how to help you through betrayal trauma. And if you're a partner who's listening to this, absolutely, absolutely seek support and seek support from people who are specialized in working through either infidelity or compulsive sexual behaviors. Another thing we can do, and this is like number one. Okay. All of these are foundational. I'll just say that. I'm giving you the list of foundations, but practice self-care. And I'm not talking about self-care that just makes you feel good for the moment. I'm talking about the type of self-good this I'm talking about the type of self-care that nourishes and soothes and heals your soul. And this type of self-care usually doesn't just instantly make you feel good. Usually it's this consistency of doing this self-care that starts filling up your bucket. So often we talk about those who have betrayed, them doing their work and how they need this consistency over time. You and your work on this healing yourself and this finding yourself after you've gone through so much requires that same consistency over time. It requires that consistency in prioritizing your physical, emotional, mental, spiritual well being. And I say all of those because we want a little bit of each one every day consistently. It does not have to be huge. Your physical self care may be as simple as today I am showering, or your physical self care is I am going to eat meals today and they're going to be healthy food. Or your spiritual self care is I am going to just practice breathing and meditating, or I am going to say a prayer. And that's it. That's your spiritual self care for today. And if you want to add more and build more, absolutely. But this consistency over time with your self care is going to be very instrumental in your healing. When I see individuals who hit walls or who become the most stuck, a lot of times, certainly not all, 'cause my brain's already giving me times that this is different, but a lot of times it's because we have slowed down or neglected our own self-care. And there will be times that you will need twice the self-care that you normally need. In the beginning of our healing journey, we are going to need extra levels of self-care. If we have a new disclosure, or if we're going through an exceptionally challenging time, or we're preparing for a full therapeutic disclosure, all of those times, what maybe in self care has gotten us through before, we're going to have to double or even triple. And if your self care has been tiny before and we double it and triple it, I know that sounds scary of like, where am I going to find this time? We have to learn how to prioritize that own taking care of ourselves. Another thing we do that really helps us find ourselves again is by working on our boundary work. I have a book that I am recommending to every client. I didn't plan to show this for those of you who are watching this on YouTube. The Book of Boundaries, Set the Limits That Will Set You Free by Melissa Urban. It's just sitting here on my desk because I recommend this book so often. It is such a great book for really for anybody. It's not betrayal trauma based, but it's just foundational boundaries. And I really love it because it takes boundaries and it really breaks them down. It gives lots of scripts and lots of ideas, but it also talks about green light, yellow light, and red light boundaries where it can ease us into this boundary work. But why boundaries are so important as part of finding ourselves again is they help us identify what triggers responses in us. It helps us learn how to listen to our body, and then it teaches us how to start honoring ourselves. It builds this self trust. When we can start learning how to show up for ourselves, to listen to ourselves, to honor ourselves, it gives us that healing of finding ourselves that helps that brain start reintegrating, but it also helps us and allows us to show up better and more authentically in our relationships. And even as we do that, we get that added benefit back to us of again knowing and honoring ourselves even better. So setting boundaries. Now, I know that boundary work is so complex. There's boundaries with others, there's boundaries with ourselves, there's boundaries around spaces, there's boundaries around time, there's boundaries around energy. We have done lots of episodes on boundaries. So I recommend the book. Go back and listen to some of our episodes. Wherever you are in your boundary work, and this will be my next one I'll go into. We want to use the self compassion and understanding that boundaries is a journey. And so making sure that boundaries is part of our healing process of finding ourselves, but also understanding that it is a journey as we build up. So as we do that, we want to have self compassion and practicing. Notice I said the word practice, practicing self compassion and being patient and kind with ourselves through this journey is going to really aid that healing process. We have to accept that healing takes time and progress often comes in small steps. It's line upon line and avoiding the self blame, avoiding the shame, practicing that self compassion really can help us start to find ourselves again as we navigate this journey. So, self compassion, super, super important. Another thing that's really good is learning how to build in a routine. Now, if you're somebody who has had a routine in the past, your routine and what you are able to do post trauma often will not look the same. Your capacity level is not going to look the same. So, self compassion, have some self compassion with that, but building just a really basic routine, that structure can also just aid in your ability to be able to find yourself again and to continue to help some of those pieces come together in that reintegration. Also, along with this is explore coping strategies. Sometimes I think the word coping strategies gets a bad name, almost like that's bad, but there are lots of healthy coping mechanisms that could work for us. We tend to use the words here on the podcast, tools and working your recovery. Healthy coping mechanisms and using these tools could include things like journaling, meditation, deep breathing exercises, meeting with your therapist, joining a support group, having a coach. All of those things could be some really healthy coping mechanisms to help you cope with the trauma that you're going through. Another one is rediscovering your passion and interest. When we go through trauma, one of those big disconnects often are the things that we love. Because we go straight into survival mode, we tend to drop off all of those extra things that once brought us joy. And when you're just trying to survive, a lot of times we're not doing those things anymore. They don't feel important. They don't hold pleasure. They don't hold joy because, again, we're just trying to survive. So, rediscovering our passion and interest as we do this, I think it's really important that we pull in that self compassion, we pull in that patience, and we recognize that when you start to do this again, that it's not going to feel the same. And this area of our life may have had some real ruptures in it. We've had this disconnect. And so, bridging the gap, we want to take baby steps back into it. But having that focus of, I want to rediscover my passions and interests, and maybe even build in some new ones. We'll start with reconnecting with activities or hobbies that used to bring you joy and let go of the expectation that it will feel the same or look the same, but start exploring those again with where you're at. I just take a deep breath because there's a lot of grief and mourning here. And I want to sit with that for a minute. There's a lot of grief and mourning that can come with losing or feeling like we've lost those things that we love. And we've lost that sense of identity and purpose. And we've lost these passion and these interests. These don't come back automatically. So if you are waiting for them to just be restored to you, unfortunately, that's not the way that it works. There will be this painful period or this concentrated, determined period of healing this part of you. And I'm sorry. I wish that there was a better answer that you would just get these things back. But healing is an active process. So rediscovering your passions and interests will take effort on your part to do. So going over those again, these basic things that you can be working on is foundationally self-care and self-compassion, rediscovering your passions and interest, and prioritizing or making a concentrated effort to do that, establishing a basic routine, explore the coping strategies and using your tools, setting boundaries, seeking support, and acknowledging the experience you're having. As you do these things, trust the process. It does not happen instantly, and a lot of times it never happens as quick as we want it. But as you trust this process and trust that you can heal and trust that your body is hardwired to heal. And as you trust this process and keep doing it, consistency over time will bring you healing. So as you do this work, Amy and I are rooting you on. We know it's hard and we're so proud of you. And you sitting here listening is you doing the work, and take the things that you hear and put those into action. I know there have been times where I listen and then I don't do. So, of all of these things that I've listed, please, if you're doing none of them, don't now just go sprint and try to do them all, but choose one or two things that this week I want to focus on. And then maybe next week we can add a tiny bit more and a tiny bit more. And as we take those baby steps forward, that's where we'll get the healing. So, as always, thank you for joining us for the podcast this week. And we look forward to seeing you all next week.